faster. Living off borrowed time. The clock ticks faster. Living off borrowed time. The clock ticks faster. Living off borrowed time. Living off borrowed time, the clock tick faster. Living off borrowed time, the clock tick faster. Living off borrowed time, the clock tick faster. Living off borrowed time, the clock tick faster.
Hello everybody, welcome to the Living Off Borrowed Time podcast. I'm your host, Patrique on RYM, joined as always by OptimalAudio, Caleb. And continuing with the summer of RYM legends that we have. Last week we had Ross, this week we have somebody else who needs no introduction if you're on the RYM website, which again, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a very strong chance that you are. A repeat guest, although our previous episode just lost to time due to technical issues, and honestly, I don't think that was one of our better episodes anyway, because I don't know if there was an episode's worth of material there. And then, like I said, horrible ass introductions. Anyway, Marsbars from RYM, Marshall, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Has his own podcast as well.
Yes. This is a thing that professional people who do podcasts do introductions. They tell about their guests, like do other things, that reasons you might care that they're there. Thank you for picking up slack on that.
Has his own podcast, Body of Work, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. So
find us on SoundCloud.
Right, on SoundCloud. Hopefully, I will be on that podcast at some point, talk about Outkast. But anyway.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yep, and on this episode, we'll be talking about the year 1999 in hip-hop, which is a very interesting year. Some legendary albums that year, some legendarily bad albums that year, some great artists. And you would think that the East Coast fell off, but honestly, it didn't. Although, if you look at some of the big East Coast albums, there are signs that it was no longer the defining force that it was, if you look at them.
It was slowly becoming less defined by its borders, for sure. Hip hop, I mean, it was less West Coast versus East Coast, and it was more just becoming hip hop.
Definitely, and a lot of the albums are just fucking weird, which is great. Like, there's definitely a sort of concept album streak running through most of them. That, like, I'm just looking at the RYM charts, but even like the bigger albums, like the bigger pop albums, like Eminem, which was probably the biggest album culturally that year, it's like a concept album. It's a character album.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we do a lot of shitting on Eminem on this show because past 15 years of Eminem. But that album, I guess that's a good place to start, and not just because you're Marshall. Although that's we have the worst intros but the best transitions. So
a good transition. Yeah, I think it's a good album. I think it's a great album. Obviously it's not as good as Marshall Mathers LP. I like that it is a more honest snapshot of who Eminem was in 1999, whereas nowadays you have no idea who Eminem is because he just keeps playing the same angry, fast rapping sort of like nobody, basically. Like he's got 2 songs in here that he cut in the late 90s before he got signed on to Aftermath about how depressed he was because he was broke poor. That's Rock Bottom and I forgot the other one right now, but like,
fuck? Just Don't Give a Fuck, or
If I Had, sorry, it's If I Had, because it's based on the song If I Had $1 Million, and he obviously didn't have $1 million at the time. And like I think they're as touching as early Eminem could possibly be, but obviously the album as a whole isn't touching. It's, you know, a lot of juvenile humor, some rape jokes, misogyny and that sort of thing, but like, you know, you look past that because you have a truly great rapper. So I think it holds up. How about you guys?
Yeah, I think it holds up. I think this is actually, I mean, I don't know if I can. I'll be honest. I don't really listen to Eminem these days, and just for all the reasons that.
Does anybody who listened to Eminem in the early 2000s still listen to Eminem? I mean, like, I guess they must because he's still hitting streaming numbers and selling millions. But
well, I just meant in the grand scheme of things in general. Even with this album and Marshall Mathers, which I still would say as good albums, but I have no desire to listen to them.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll ever have the desire to listen to them because
is it because the beats have dated, do you think?
I think it's also because I think Patrick and I spoke about this a few weeks ago. It's because maybe Marshall Mathers to a bigger extent created a lot of bad trends in hip hop.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
In the sense that Joyner Lucas doesn't exist without that album, or the Logics of the world in certain cases don't exist without that album, or just it spawned a lot of garbage and wannabe Eminemism, and really Eminem was one of the only people that could pull off what he was pulling off at the time, I think.
Yeah, because I think he committed so hard to being Eminem, to being Slim Shady, or being whoever he was trying to be. Like, even against all the criticisms that, like, oh, you're too misogynistic or too homophobic, he just went more homophobic and more misogynistic. Like, he fully committed to the part. I think to his detriment overall, because I don't think, like, there's a song here. It goes, the world's not against you. I'm sorry your father raped you. So what you had your little coochie in your dad's mouth. Like that's garbage. That's just trash. I hope people thought it was trash in 1999, and like it remains trash.
Right, and I think that like Eminem committing to the bit but throwing in the rock bottoms, or the if I had, like you had said, about the personal statements, even something like Just Don't Give a Fuck, which I still think is like it walks the line so hard between like something I would cringe at and something I would find funny, but for that time, like that was not a song that people were doing, essentially. And also the version on this album is better than the original version. It has a better beat.
Is the best. I love My Fault, by the way. That's probably the most underrated.
I haven't heard this album in a long time, but I remember liking that song.
Yeah, it's a story song, and it's like the sort of loose, funny story song. It's just he gives a girl mushrooms at a party just to make her be quiet, and he's sarcastic. The hook is him sarcastically saying that he didn't mean to, and now it's his fault, and he's just really insincere. And the verses of the story, and it's really good, and it's a kind of throwbacky without trying to be a throwback, because that's kind of where he comes from on the album. Like, his influences are definitely Masta Ace, Redman, and AZ, and more than any other album you hear that in the way he raps, the way he structures songs, and that's probably why I like this project more. I like it more than the next one, because even though the next one has better songs, this one has my favorite rapping of his, aside from something like Freestyle Manual, which is when he was a more entertaining. Like, I'm sure he can still freestyle. I don't want to hear him do it, though, because it's obnoxious. He's just yelling at me. Like, shut the fuck up. I like that awful hot coffee pot thing where he's like the world's angriest John Cena. Like, fuck up. I don't need that shit. So
I think I agree with you, Pat. I probably like. I mean, I have them rated the same, so I don't know if I would pick one over the other necessarily, but I think I like some songs on here, just like my favorite songs on here, the ones I would listen to rather, more than the ones on Marshall Mathers. And maybe it's because Marshall Mathers was just such a monumentally big album.
Yeah, unescapable. Like, I think.
Right, and it's like, I never need to hear Stan again. It's that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think its ubiquity as it remains like the best-selling hip-hop album of all time has really like just made me not want to ever hear it again. Even though you're right, the songs are better. The you could argue that the rapping is better too. Like, the flow is tighter and more fiery in parts, but I feel like this one has just more character, and the songs are slightly more underrated and definitely more under discussed. It's funnier too. I get too blunted off of funny homegrown because when I smoke out, I hit the trees harder than Sonny Bono. That's fucking hilarious. That's so dark and funny. But yeah. Like
No,
yeah.
I think "As the World Turns" is a really good song.
It's a surprisingly deep album in terms of cuts. Real quick, I know Marshall, you probably don't go to the Discord. Optimal, I want you to look in the Discord. Kanye, I guess, just made a shoe available and it looks like a goddamn outsider art piece. I don't know how people are supposed to.
Well, he's a yeah. I know exactly. I see it. I've already seen it. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yep.
It kind of looks like something that West Side.
It's like an alien. It's like an alien croc.
I had no idea about any of this, so
Kanye at this point in his career in the fashion industry is making things that are either every shoe he makes is an earth tone color. Every piece of clothing he makes is drapey and like made for dads and is an earth tone color. And then this new thing he's making, which is like a slipper, but it looks like a croc in the year like 2100, basically. Like if you know what Crocs are.
Yeah, I don't know.
Who doesn't? People still wear them.
Oh God, they're so bad. If anyone in the audience wears Crocs, I'm sorry.
I'm not.
Yeah, I used to know people that when I was a lot younger, that when Crocs were like first popping off, that would wear like the bright fluorescent yellow ones. I'm just like, what are you doing?
So yeah, I had to that.
As a random aside from this very dark Eminem album.
Yes, but it is a very deep album in terms of like album cuts. I don't ever need to hear My Name Is again in my life. I've heard it a million times at the time, and I found it in like back when it first came out. I was watching MTV every day and listening to the radio every day, and I would not consider myself at that point like I tolerated hip hop. I was not a hip hop fan, and that song was more annoying to me than anything. And I kind of slotted it in the same spot as like Beastie Boys. It was like white hip hop essentially, but I liked Beastie Boys and I didn't like that. Although I like subsequent Eminem songs more, but I always put it in that like rock set. Like the rock station played Eminem songs. They didn't play other hip hop except for Eminem and Beastie Boys, which that's interesting, right?
Yeah, no, and that with me when I was in like grade school and middle school, like up until probably about like I was 13, 14, I would just either hear the radio in the car or listen to it, whatever. But that was the same case in like terrestrial like pop radio as well, like mainstream pop radio. You'd hear Eminem circa Recovery, but you wouldn't hear any other hip hop at the time that wasn't Lil Wayne doing a crossover.
Yeah, it's definitely an unfortunate part of mainstream radio and mainstream MTV on how like the most famous rapper that like the only rapper that usually people listen to is fucking Eminem, right? For the most obvious of reasons.
I don't like rap, but I like
Eminem.
Right.
Yeah, like you hear that all the fucking time. As for My Name Is, what I find very interesting, like I don't listen to it either, but what I find very interesting is that I think Dr. Dre lets him down with that beat. The beat is so basic and not at all like what you would expect of Dr. Dre. It's like just the drums and the bass, and then at some point he adds a little bit of feedback and like a keyboard or an organ. It's very simple. And I guess it's riding very hard on that hook, but you're like Patrick's absolutely correct. Like I don't need to hear it because when I close my eyes, I can hear it in my head right now. The whole "Hi, my name is," like I can hear it, right? So
thank you for that. Really didn't need even you saying it just like sets off the trigger in my head of that annoying ass distant ass hook. And it would also set off the template for all the Eminem comedy singles, which would just have the simple, repetitive, basic beats. Like, and I don't know, and that template got really like I don't like pretty much any of them. Honestly, Crack a Bottle off of Relapse is not the worst one he's ever done. And people acted like it was. Like
it got a lot worse in subsequent albums.
Yes, it did. And We Made You was worse. But Yeah, speaking of Dre, he had an album that year that I was for a long time considered one of my favorite albums. It's also an album I never need to hear again, though, like that I never listened to. And continues this podcast recent trend of me shitting on Dr. Dre every week.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to shit on a Dr. Dre album I actually like.
Yeah.
Never,
Do we want
yeah.
to talk about 2001?
I figured this is as good a time as any. We were talking about Dre beats. Let's talk about like an album that this was probably one of my first favorite hip hop albums, and I can safely say that I never listened to it anymore.
Is it because it falls off hard right after Let's Get High? Like I think the second half is just tremendously boring.
It's like a million weed carriers also, and I'm not including Corrupt in that, but for the most part.
But even Corrupt is not like, he's not exactly like okay, I guess a big point is like the Chronic had, I think, like 12 features from Snoop Dogg, and Snoop Dogg is delegated to like 3 beats here, and he's usually on hook duty, whereas like Eminem, who is prodigious and who's quite great at rapping, is only on like 1 song, I think. So I think the problem is he's not like, Dr. Dre's not even leveraging the right features. He's making too much use over Hitman or whatever the fuck. Like I don't like this album very much. I think Still Dre, Still DRE, I think like that one, it might be my favorite Dr. Dre song. I think the beat is incredible for it. It's skeletal and yet it's so fucking massive. It's like a whole orchestra is doing it. I think Forgot About Dre is also great with that guitar. He's using that guitar sound a lot. It's like this pinched guitar that twitches and it keeps getting cut off. Like the notes are being cut off. I like The Watcher as well, like the opening track, and a couple other ones. But like Fuck You, the song with Devin the Dude, I think that's so awful.
It's like a worse version of like Ain't No Fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which and I said this. I think I said this last week in the Screw episode, but I remember saying about Ain't No Fun how it's like a song that's super problematic, but I really like it. Where that song, to me, I don't like it, and it obviously has all of the super problematic elements too, which is a theme in this album.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I hope you like skits. This album's got a lot of skits, and they're really great. And it's definitely fun to listen to this album all the way through and listen to all of the skits. It's also fun to have this be on your MP3 player when you first get an MP3 player and you have like 10 albums on shuffle, and you keep getting the same skits on shuffle over and over, like Pause for Porno, when you're trying to do anything, and Pause for Porno keeps coming. So yeah, so this album's got a lot of like fucking filler on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the heartfelt ones, like The Message with Mary J. Blige, like I find it funny because like the Dr. Dre's verse where he talks about wanting to die because he can't ride with his homie, like because they're dead. Like it's ghost written, right? So it's not even like the emotional part is wholly missing in this album. Whenever it even decides to do an emotional part. I will say that the drum beats on this album are consistently good. They're thumping for sure. Spoon, that indie band that I don't know if anyone remembers, they actually talk about how 2001, the drum beats influenced one of their albums, and you could kind of tell because the drum beats on that particular album were heavier than normal.
Yeah, I was just
which Spoon album?
It's the They Want My Soul. They Spoon.
Oh, the one, yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Hey, okay. I was just thinking about Spoon. Of course I remember them. They're one of my favorite bands, and they never fell off. And I was just thinking they were probably going to come out with an album this year.
Yeah, Patrick is a big...
And I did not take Patrick to be a Spoon fan. So
I have that.
Very selective in his...
I have Ga at a 10. I have They Want My Soul at a 9. I would probably move it to a 10 on some days.
Wow. Even I didn't know that.
That's crazy.
The only Spoon album I really don't care for. I'm not a big fan of Transference, although Got Nothing is one of their best songs. I think Kill the Moonlight is very overrated. But I love Spoon. I would kill to see them live. You didn't know I like Spoon? Spoon's
you know what? People on Radio Music just don't talk about Spoon anymore. They I think they used to in the context of a remarkably consistent band, indie band, but I don't even hear anything about them anymore.
I will say they are pretty consistent. I don't think I love any of their albums. I like Gaga 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 a lot. I don't.
Yeah, it's got some really good hooks on it.
Yeah, it's got some really, really good hooks on that. I don't really listen to any of their albums though besides that one. And none of their albums are like are bad or anything. I just don't like. I don't listen to them as much. But I think I liked them a little more when I was like just getting into like, you know, quote unquote indie adjacent music or something like that. I haven't revisited their discography in a while.
Yeah.
But I knew Patrick. I knew you were a big fan of them.
I don't listen to them all the time, but when I do, it always holds up.
Mhm.
I think it has an incredible voice and writes really good lyrics. And
I think it comes down to like liking his voice. I think that's like what I think for some people they might not like the voice. I could see that sort of. I think that's probably what it would come down to. But yeah, I don't know. I like his voice typically.
But yeah, I mean, going back to the Dre, I mean, that's cool to know that about They Want My Soul. I hadn't thought about that. Now it makes sense. I will not shit on the Dre album like Mars will necessarily, although, yeah, the Weed Carrier verses are just like painful after a point. The emotional component is not there at all when you consider the fact that Dre does not write a single note on this album. I mean, a single word on the album. And I'm sure there will be accusations about how much he actually did in production-wise, considering that he, like, as I harp on and on about the past 15 years, he's done hardly anything. It's been all like Mark Batson and his engineers doing all the fucking work and like a bunch of turns. So how much did he actually do? But I mean, I think the production on it's certain, like, I think it sounds amazing. It sounds like as of the time and futuristic as it possibly could without, like, I don't think this album will ever truly sound dated, which I think is to its credit. And
yeah, surprisingly, because, you know, they made memes out of like 3 of the songs now.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of production, in terms of rapping, like the rapping itself can be like corny as fuck. So yes, the rapping can make it sound dated. Although Forgot About Dre is a classic, will always be a classic. The next episode is a classic, will always be a classic. So much of a. Does anybody else remember? Like, were either of you listening to the radio and that City High "What Would You Do" song came on the radio and it like literally took the part from the next episode? What would you do?
I was not, at least not on the radio. Rather,
you know what song I'm talking about?
Yeah,
though,
I do know that. I do know that song.
It came out like a year afterwards, and it just used that part of the song. I always thought that was bizarre and lazy. Like, you can't just do that. You can't just steal part of like a much more popular song for your. I don't know.
Also, like, Explosive was obviously influential because Kanye took the drums on that, right? That was the whole.
Oh yeah, he talked about it on Last Call.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly. Yeah.
So I mean, and you know, I still like that song a lot. Like, I don't know, I would say that I like this album. I haven't listened to it in a while. I like it. I prefer The Chronic by a lot. I don't listen to Dre much, but I reach for. I guess if I'm like listening to a West Coast playlist, rather, there would be a bunch of like Chronic songs on it, and that would be like.
Oh, there'd have to be.
The Chronic's still a great record. I still love that album. This one, I would say that I like just because I think that there are a couple songs in the back half that I like, and I think that holds it up for the most part. But the skits, I mean, yikes, and the some of the Weed Carrier stuff, like you and Patrick were saying, definitely, I mean, an obvious glaring flaw. But yeah.
All right. Normally when we do like a list show like this, we just kind of pass it around one to the other to like somebody just throw something out there. So I guess I'll just give it to Marshall and then he can give it to Optimal. And then you guys just like bring up an album. We'll discuss it and like pass it off one. Yeah. Each person gets one album. How's that sound?
Yeah, that's totally fine. That's totally fine by me. I might as well do Most Def.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Black on Both Sides. I think this is rated #1 for hip hop on Rate Your Music.
Yeah, it's #1 on the 99
on the hip hop charts, rather, on the hip hop filter.
The hip hop filter.
So
it is favorite Mos Def album, and it's not my favorite hip hop album of 1999, but it is a really good album. It's an incredibly good album, and it has probably, I think Umi Says might be the best Mos Def song. Umi Says, hip hop are competitors for best Mos Def song, I would say easily. Mathematics too. Mathematics is amazing.
Yeah.
I think the beats on the production's uniformly really good. His performance is like incredibly charismatic throughout. Miss Fat Booty is probably the song a lot of people knew him for forever on it. I think we're going to see so many Busta Rhymes features over the course of this episode.
Busta Rhymes was absolutely everywhere in 1999. So like every album had a Busta Rhymes feature.
And he's ranting about Y2K on 99% of them. He was very ranting about fucking Y2K.
The only difference between those Busta Rhyme features and all the ones he randomly did at the turn of the 2010s was that those ones he was just rapping as fast as he could go. This one, at least, he was doing that, but it was more charismatic.
So this was actually one of the first non-Eminem hip hop albums I ever heard. I heard it back in 2010, leaping here from Plastic Beach because Mos Def features twice there. And I recognize his name because I knew him as an actor first and foremost. Actually, he was on a House episode and he was on the remake of Italian Job. And I absolutely love some of these songs, like "Fear Not of Man." Like the spoken word bit is so touching. I think when they start to like hip hop will get better when people get better, and people get better when they start to understand that they are valuable and they're not valuable because they got a whole lot of money. And like that part that he does, like I think that's incredibly touching. There's a line on Love that I think is so like that for me really turned me towards hip hop as someone who barely listened to it beforehand. It was IMC, which means I must cultivate the earth. Like it was just so simple and yet such a profound statement, I thought. But so now I'd rather listen to the Ecstatic, not because I think the rapping is better, because I definitely don't think the rapping is better, but because I think the beats are more interesting. I think that the fact that Black on Both Sides, and this goes for a lot of the albums from 99 and from the late 90s in general, like the fact that it's 70 minutes is just really hard for me to swallow as a whole. I think Rock and Roll, I hate that song. Like I truly hate it. Like I don't agree with the sentiment really. I do agree with the sentiment. I just don't think it's handled particularly well. And the same thing with Mr. N-Word. Like I don't think that its lyrics have aged particularly well. As Patrick said, Miss Fat Booty, absolute classic. I can't believe they got that sample from a pre-famous Aretha Franklin record. And Mathematics, I love that song too. Even though it makes me sad because they talk about 9 planets and how there's going to be a 10th, which obviously it went backwards from there. But yeah, yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm very rare in the sort of person that actually prefers the Ecstatic. But yeah, that's me.
No, I prefer the Ecstatic too, dude. I love the favorite hip hop albums. And I think his rapping is actually more interesting on that one. Although I think it's technically better on this album. Like traditionally better. I find a lot more. The Ecstatic is. There's so much. I would say that this is his raucous album. The Ecstatic is his Stone's Throw album.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The production credits on this, and will.i.am, he is not a producer, but he contributed Fender Rhodes. I wonder on which track. So shout out to young will.i.am playing the Fender Rhodes on something on here. I think the instrument, the neo soul stuff hits me a lot. Like the stuff on here that really hits me is more half the neo soul stuff, like the May December instrumental that closes it, and Umi Says, which kind of predicts modern Marvel on the New Danger, which is an album I think is like misunderstood, underrated, and a complete fucking mess all at once. It's the weakest of the three because I don't consider True Magic a real album. I don't know what the fuck True Magic is, but it's just. Yep. I
definitely agree about the neo soul stuff. Like even May to December, I think that's a gorgeous closer, and like you would think that would be an obvious one to cut, but like I would never get rid of it. Like in terms of like trying to trim down the fat, so to speak. Like I think it's I think it's quite good. And Climb as well with it sounds a lot like some of the backing vocals on the Roots album. Probably because they were doing like hanging around the same circles at the time. But yeah.
Oh, yeah, you get that definitely the Roots connection with Vinaya Majaika. Oh my God. Another podcast tradition here, aside from the horrible intros, is that I'll butcher somebody's name at some point.
You know, I don't know how to pronounce her name, so I'm glad you just took a stab and went with it, because that's why I skirted around that. But yeah,
we know who I'm talking about. The R&B, the one listed R&B singer feature on the RYM track list on track 12 is the Roots connection here, obviously, and it definitely feels a piece of the it's a year before like Water for Chocolate. It's the same year as if I was just like throwing albums out there, but I'm not gonna steal Optimal's turn. I would transition into talking about Things Fall Apart, but that's what I would talk about when it gets to be my turn. So
yeah, no pressure on Caleb or anything.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, now it's like, don't you dare talk about My Things Fall Apart. No, I was not going to talk about that, but that is an amazing album, and I look forward to hearing both your thoughts on it, because I know for a fact that both of you really like it. So, I was going to talk about, it's a very on-brand pick, but I was going to talk about The Devil's Playground, the Koopsta album, which...
Oh, I don't know it. Oh, no, I do know it. Yeah, my bad.
It's one of the all-time classic Memphis rap records.
Absolutely, yeah. It's so fucking hypnotic.
It's so I think it's got some of the best. I was thinking about this going back and listening to it last night. Well, I probably listen to it every couple of months because it is one of my favorite Memphis records. But I was thinking that out of all the 3-6 camp and their affiliates, I think Lord Infamous still has my favorite flow, but I think that Koopsta is probably second on that list. Kingpin Skinny Pimp is right there, but interchangeably. But I think Koopsta's flow on this is so good, and like you were saying, Marshall, just how hypnotic it is from the start is. It comes right in with Crucifix, which is an amazing song, and to me, there's like not really a miss on this, and it actually saves some of its best songs on the track list, for the middle to end, which is nice because you get a lot of top-heavy albums, as you guys both know. Like, just listening to music, there's a lot of top-heavy records. But I really feel like from Robbers onward is when the album really kicks into high gear. Like, that run from, really tracks 4 to, like, 9 is really 4 to
11 maybe.
11, even. Honestly. Yeah, you're right.
Robbers, I think, is the best song there because, like, his flow is just so incredible on that song. It's so unbroken.
You can hear, like, the next 20 years of rap music in that flow.
Yeah.
He is remarkable. Like, that is liquid. That's pure liquid on that, and the way it goes with the sample on the hook is perfect. I would say Stash Spot is the only song that's fucking with Robbers in terms of being even close to the best song on here. Stash Spot. It's got probably some of the most quotable lines on the album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an amazing song. I don't know if you were about to just quote a line just now.
I was, but I didn't want to get it wrong.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I love that song. I love Now I'm High, which if you listen to a lot of 3-6 and just that whole camp, Now I'm High, there's like a million different variations of it. And like the one that's probably most famous is the one on Underground Volume 1, which is like the one where it's like, now I'm high, really high, like all that. But if you listen to any of the Now I'm Highs, because there's one on a DJ Paul record as well, and there's one on a early 3-6 record, but they're all like slightly altered in some way. And this one is one of the best ones. So that very little of that made sense, but if you listen to a lot of 3-6 records, you know what I'm talking about.
Well, I understand what you were talking about, but if you haven't heard the songs, it doesn't make any sense. So yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like I'm hoping that a lot of people. It's got a decent following. It's really, I'm happy to see it so high on the 99 rap album charts like that. I feel like
I feel like that one has only grown in appreciation, like because I hadn't heard about it for the longest time, and I think probably with all the trap stuff coming out like in the past decade, I feel like, people coming back to stuff from the 90s, like this one, like it's just gotten better and better with age.
Yeah, I mean, just the beats on this and with the beats on any project, from 3.6, whether it was in the mid to late 90s or even early 2000s, like you can, before they really fell into like just making crunk albums, which they did with the album that had Stay Fly on it and Pop My Collar, Most Known Unknown. That was when they just were like, fuck it, we're just gonna make a crunk album. But really, like before that, their albums were still rooted in like the really grimy, dark, like hypnotic, nocturnal sound, and like plenty of producers in this day and age have come out and said like that they listened to a bunch of those records. Like, Metro Boomin has said they were like the biggest influence on him in production. If you listen to like Without Warning, you can definitely tell that is the case. So I don't know if this album specifically was super influential, but as part of a whole scene, it was definitely.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I love the dark atmosphere on it. It's a different kind of dark atmosphere than the other 3.6 stuff. Really, only the DJ Paul tracks feel more like traditional 3.6, and only really Ready to Ride and What You Gonna Do. Crucifix feels like a Koopsa original. Like it feels like slower, crawlier. Like, and 3.6 is already fairly slow, but it's not like as comically menacing. It's still like got like a threatening vibe to it, but
yeah, like a horror sort of like nightmare carnival sort of thing going on.
And I feel like that's where the Without Warning influence that Caleb was talking about comes in. Is like that whole like, autumn, like horror movie and autumn atmosphere to it. Like even the title, Devil's Playground Underground Solo, could be like a straight to VHS DVD cheap underground horror, where the beats kind of feel like a blown out VHS tape almost.
Yeah.
And so, and Koop's flow on it is just so good throughout. It's just so addictive. It's long, but it doesn't feel long.
Right, and that's the thing. Also, like it's an hour or so, but every track is so high quality. Like that's why I said it's one of the best Memphis records. Like I feel like it's an album where it's pretty, like where people who are super super into this style of rap would say it's one of the best ones, as well as like you could pull someone who doesn't listen to a lot of Memphis rap and say, hey, here's one that I'd recommend for you, like along with the Mystic Styles of the world and the Volume 1 compilation and etc. So I feel like it's got a unique appeal because it is so like such like a headbanger kind of album, but also it's an album that like people who really appreciate Memphis rap still hold up as one of the best.
Yeah, I agree.
That's all I've got to say about it, but I fucking love this album, so I'm glad that got a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, I actually listened to it in quite a while. I'd listened to it before, but I hadn't listened to it for a while until doing the homework for this podcast, and I like it more than ever. It's probably one of my top 5, maybe even top 3, 3.6 or 3.6 adjacent projects. I think the production on it's probably DJ Paul's high, like up there. I'm trying to think of the 94 tape that DJ Paul put out. It's probably his best production moment, but this is second to that, I would say.
Yeah, and that's a high bar considering just the amount of material and quality material that DJ Paul was involved with around that. Whether it was his own stuff, yeah.
But the first track, like, what is that loop? It's like a sitar or something. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's a sitar, I think. Torture Chamber. Yeah, that's what really drew me in.
And that's a sound that's like uniquely like Memphis. Like you can tell when you hear like that track, or even a track like Stash Pot. Like when you hear what's going on in like that beat, you know immediately like where it's from,
who it comes from, and who's responsible, rather, even in a way.
Yeah,
exactly.
It has a time and place to it for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, great record. And to counter you, Patrick, I think I would also put it in my top 5. I think my top 5 is Mystic Styles, Underground. I mean, no, Underground Volume 1, Mystic Styles, this album, the Kingpin Skinny Pimp record, and the Volume 16 94, the DJ Paul tape, which is what I think you were talking about.
Yes, that's the one I was thinking.
That's an amazing. That's some of the best Memphis rap for sure. So yeah. So I guess Patrick, it's your turn, right?
Well, I'm going to surprise everybody and talk about "Things Fall Apart" by The Roots, which I think I'm coming. Just to get it out of the way. So we talked about the number 1 album, we might as well talk about the number 2 on the list anyway. And I feel like it says a lot about like our like general like rap taste in terms of people. Like, I don't know how you would classify RYM's rap taste in terms of. I don't know why I'm trying to have a bigger discussion about this, but that these are the number 1 and number 2 albums. I guess Doom at number 3, and then the Coopsta album at number 4.
But even just the top 3, it's a very like I don't know how to really phrase it in a way that like this particular Roots album, like even Questlove in his memoir, he talks about having a fear and anxiety of being perceived as too white on this album moving forward. And I like the fact that the Most Def and that this album are number 1 and number 2, I think sort of speaks to that. It has more of an appeal than their previous albums did. Like, it's better for sure as well, but he fucking name drops Black Thought name drops Radiohead on this album. So like I think that goes to show like some of the appeal there.
And I feel like you can actually, there's a little bit of Radiohead influence in some of Quest's drum beats, at least on that the "You Got Me" outro, maybe like the little like the skittery bit he does on like either the bridge or the outro of "You Got Me."
Yeah, the best part.
Yeah,
because then you get to hear Erykah Badu just float over that part, and it's just it meshes so well, and it like functions as a true climax too.
I would disagree that this is better than Illadelph, honestly. Maybe that's just, I chalk that up to personal preference. It's their most well put together album up to this point, one of their best. There's not a bad song on here. The like Questlove in terms of the way he like, because you get the sense from his memoir, which is great, and everybody should read it, by the way. It has tons of great stories in terms of, and also like the stories behind a lot of the albums. You get the sense that he is the one who's like responsible for how these things are constructed. He really did put this together with an eye towards like a crossover without compromising, and you get the sense of that in songs like Dynamite and Adrenaline, which have tons of energy and great rapping. But I'm trying to find the right way to say this, but they're a little more palatable than just being straight up rap songs.
Yeah, and like they were even hinting at that earlier with there's a song on Illadelph Half-Life where it's like it's mostly instrumental. It's like a jazz song, and it's got Gosh, fuck! I'm losing my mind here.
Once I look at the track list on that, it's one of the ones. Is it one of the ones at the end?
The Shine, One Shine. Yep, it's like a 6-minute jazz, like a jazzy sort of thing going on, and like it's hinting towards what they start doing around here. I'm trying to remember who's on that.
Yeah, like that. Like Illadelph was definitely their jazz album. This is like more like, well, the last two were like 90s jazz rap albums. This has jazz influences and integrates them into a more traditional rap album. Before Phrenology was like their rock crossover album, like full, essentially.
That's a good way to describe Phrenology for sure. Okay, so my big thing on Rate Your Music is the fact that I fucking hate that they've tagged it conscious rap and jazz rap, because like
we were just having this word. Yes, there's nothing conscious about this album.
There's nothing conscious about this fucking album. Okay, sorry. There's one spoken word thing at the back that no one listens to, by the way. I guarantee the people who voted conscious rap didn't even make it that far, because like obviously they didn't actually fucking listen to the lyrics. Like it's just battle rap, right? Like the centerpiece song, the one with Most Def, Double Trouble, they're literally talking about how great they are and imitating gunshots. And I feel like that, while like that's more extreme than some of the rest of the album, it's not that far off. and I don't find the beats like the beats are nighttime for sure, and they're from the lineage of a Tribe Called Quest, but they're not jazzy. Like like the chords being used, you could argue that they're jazz chords, but there's nothing even remotely jazzy about this. And like Rate Your Music's misuse of jazz rap has only been surpassed by its misuse of the term cloud rap.
No, I disagree. It's been the use of the term lo-fi.
Oh yeah, that one's also bad. Alternative R&B is also slowly getting up there if it hadn't already been up there.
Anyone who has ever spoken to Earl Sweatshirt now has the lo-fi tag associated with them on Rate Your Music.
Yeah, this is anybody who has heard of the Roots and seen the cover of this album thinks it's a conscious album and seen the title
exactly.
of
the cover is so it's a powerful picture for sure, but it's not like it doesn't mesh with this album.
And it was one of three. There were three other covers to this album, actually. Like, they issued 4 covers. I forget where the other ones are, if you can see them on RYM, but it was like, yeah, I recall. I forgot what the story was behind that, but they definitely went with, like, they have a history of issuing covers to piss off their record label and get attention, like the Rising Down cover. But Rising Down's actually a more conscious album than this.
Oh, yeah, it's probably their most political album. I love Rising Down. I think I'd rather listen to Rising Down than this one, to be honest.
Rising Down album is really underrated. I love the full band like sound on Rising Down. I think it's mixed really well. I love
so murky, and the beats, Questlove's drum beats hit so fucking hard on that one, because now it's got like that more of a rock heft that they picked up around phonology, and it's just so like, I don't know, like it's more political, and it deserves to be, because and 75 bars, oh my god, that's honestly,
a good. When that came out, I just mainly repeated the first. Well, not the first track. Obviously, is the screaming into a phone at the record label, but the Rising Down, the title track, and 75 bars, and the Wale track, which is funny if you've ever listened to this podcast, that I was like repeating a Wale track over and over. But that song is so fucking good. And what was the other? Like, mainly those 3 tracks I repeated so much. Like, I didn't even listen to the rest of the album. That album doesn't really have a bad track on it. I even like the R&B cuts on it, like the 2 little unwritten, or I think that's what's called, unwritten, like the Natasha Bedingfield song.
Yeah. Which is hilarious. Like, what came out, what, 2007? 2008. 2008. Okay, yeah, that was, of course. So it just, what was hot in the streets in 2008 is Natasha Bedingfield songs. But yeah,
I think it's really underrated, and I probably listen to it more. This is an album that I almost think this album falls into the I appreciate more than I like status, but I really like it, and it's really good, and it's.
Do you mean things fall apart? You mean, or
trying to tie it back apart?
Yeah. Okay, so I guess my hot take on the album is Step Into the Realm, which comes after Table of Contents in the next movement. I don't like Step Into the Realm at all. I think that the way that the RZA sort of like imitation on the piano, and how the beat just comes grinding to a halt just to start up again, I find that really nauseating, in a bad way. And like, for me, Table of Contents, such a great opener. So, after the intro, like with the fucking drums and the keyboards, like that's incredible. Not a huge fan of the second half, but like I get it. And then the next movement with the bum bum, like the backing vocals doing its thing. It's such a beautiful song. And then I don't like Step Into the Realm. But otherwise, like, I don't know. I like almost every song here. I think it offers like a very gorgeous keyboard. It's usually a keyboard or a backing vocal, like Act 2. Like I love that intro, just that intro. Don't See Us. Like just great songs for days here.
Yeah, I think to your point, that middle stretch of the album. Well, I guess to counter you guys, this is my favorite Roots album. I listened to this a lot a few years ago, probably about like 3 years ago, I want to say. I had a big phase with a lot of neo soul-ish hip hop, and this obviously fit in that realm in some cases. I actually remember, I think I told you about this, Marshall, at some point, but Dynamite was actually my alarm for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, so which is actually a really great alarm if anyone wants to use that. Like that's it like wakes you up, but you're not like annoyed at it, you know?
Mm.
It's very hard to do when an alarm is
It's a
waking you up.
JD beat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like the way it comes in, like it wakes you up and you're like happy to be awake almost is how I would describe it, because it kind of has like the way it comes on is like punchy, but it's still a little more like relaxed and laid back. But that middle stretch is probably my favorite stretch of Roots songs on a record, like from Dynamite to the 100% Dundee. I think that run. I love Double Trouble, Act 2 with Common. I love that. My favorite
And
Common.
Saying Nothing New is a great song too, with that gorgeous like guitar. That's incredible.
Oh yeah, that's a great song.
The one thing I don't like about Double Trouble, and it like for me that one was one of like my favorite songs when I was like first coming to the album in like 2011, is Mos Def just going zin 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 for like 2 minutes near the back, like yeah, and like
it's quirks about Mos Def that you find annoying at first, but if you listen to enough Mos Def, it's just such a part of his style that it becomes charming.
absolutely, like it's his, like you can't have a Mos Def album without like at least one Mos Def ad lib, I guess. But,
like the last 2 minutes of the ecstatic.
oh my god, yeah, it's like if I have to be in a mood for it, you know what I mean? You can't stop my go, like kind of corny.
It's just like any kind of. It's like like Kanye on 30 Hours. It's the same that same kind of concept where it's like a quirk that you might listen to and you're like, oh man, like can we just get to the end of the song already? But then over time, it just becomes a part of like, actually, I like this. But
You know, I never actually thought about this until just this moment, but 30 Hours is like, you know, if you think about Life of Pablo as encapsulating all of Kanye's eras into his personality, 30 Hours is a callback to Last Call.
yeah, that's a good point. Because the last call, I mean, shit, what, like 8 minutes of that song is just BSing. Like,
It's really good BSing though. It's really fucking
it's great.
fascinating BSing.
Oh, it's great. I love. I'll still listen to the whole story, and I've heard the story 100 times.
He tells that story amazingly well.
Amazing.
And it helps that the instrumental like keeps your ears perked up every time, so it never feels like it's getting boring in any sort of way.
Plus, it's definitely like from that era of Kanye, like just when anything could be. I mean, Kanye over his career has demonstrated that almost anything could be a hook. Like and they ask me, I tell them. Like it's just that like I could just listen to that song and walk around the rest of the day and repeat that line. But yeah, so great. My favorite Roots album, which is different from you two. So I'm actually glad that you brought this up, Patrick, because this is my favorite Roots record. They have a bunch of great records. This is just my personal favorite.
I like it changes for me day to day. Like I could easily say Game Theory. I could easily say Rising Down. I could easily say Phrenology. And some days I'd pick Things Fall Apart too. So yeah.
This is rare. Like my favorite Roots record often changes. This is almost never in that spot, but I will say it has some of my favorite Roots songs, and I can understand why it's this high on the 1999 list, but it wouldn't be in my top. It would be this high for me, but I do really, really like it. I think it's great as a crossover breakout album for them. I think You Got Me is probably the song they'll be remembered for them. No, The Seed is probably the song they'll be remembered for the most. One of those two.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think they were both like really popular in different ways. You Got Me got them a Grammy. I think You Got Me is the better song simply because the hook is the hook is better. Like this, like I don't, the Seed hook is, you know, it's memorable, but like I can jam to it, but I don't know if I would ever sing it out loud. Whereas like the You Got Me hook, it's so fucking good. The way she sings that, like she's fucking longing for Black Thought. She's like got the subtle vibrato going for every like word. I think it's incredible.
That Jill Scott did not get to be on the album. Like she gets a writing credit for it, so she got paid for it. Oh, and shout out to this album, by the way, real quick, for getting Beanie Siegel and Dice Raw on there. Like it was a very heavy like Philly rap flavor on the album. Jazzy Jeff, who I don't think had been on an album since, you know, the early 90s with Will Smith. I mean, like, I think he might have done his own solo stuff, but definitely had not been on an album this high profile. So for something like this commercial, those were, I mean, I know, well, I'd have to look into it because I don't think, no, the Beanie album came out in 98, so Beanie was on Rockefeller, but still, it's all, like, the rapping, all, again, it's not conscious rapping. Like, the fact that this is labeled a conscious rap album is a laugh, and people get the wrong impression because of the cover and the title, if you get the reference in the title, which is like a literary reference. But really, and the poem at the end, which again, everybody skips the poems at the end of Roots albums. Like, Lupe was smart, he put them at the beginning. People still skip them, but you're kind of forced to listen to half a second, so you kind of feel bad about it. Like, the cool poem, like, lecturing you. So it's like you kind of feel ashamed. It's like, damn, I should really be listening to, it's like eating your vegetables, but you really do just skip it every time. Like, and the case of the Roots album is at the end, so you just don't even notice it. You just skip to the beginning if you want to listen.
Well, it's also not a particularly inviting poem. It's a very sad one about rape and domestic abuse and that sort of thing. So it ends the album on an incredibly downer note.
Yeah, and I will say that's one thing I would actually. It's a great poem. It's like I've only ever listened to it once or twice in full, but it feels a little incongruous with the rest of the album. Whereas, like, I didn't really listen to the poem on Illadelph Half-Life either, but it felt more. Illadelph Half-Life is a more conscious album. Like, it is also more of a jazzy album. Like, Illadelph and Do You Want More are jazz rap albums. This isn't. It has jazz influences in the way Questlove plays and in the way, like, some of the sample. Well, there aren't samples. You know what I mean? Like, in the way, like, some of the tempos and. I don't know what I'm talking about when I try and describe how music sounds, which makes me very bad at hosting a music podcast. But it's not a jazz rap album. It just has jazz rap influences. Like the previous two were more full-on jazzy. They would never really make a jazz rap album again. The closest thing that would is the last one, honestly. That's kind of like a scary avant jazz album at times.
Yeah, probably. You could probably argue there's more of a jazz bend to it than any of their records before that, for sure. Or sorry, the records between like Phonology and that point, and then You Shoot Your Cousin. Okay. So that being said, I also miss them a lot. Like I know they're Jimmy Fallon's house band. I know they're busy. They've got lives. I know Black Thought put out 2 solo EPs. Like but I want a Roots album. You know what I mean? I don't care if it's 27 minutes with 3 skits in the middle. Like just give me it. Because like I think Black Thought as a rapper. Like, he still outdoes himself time and time again.
He's the only rapper I can think of who has gotten, like, there are rappers who maintain their ability, some who get a little better or get a different perspective as they get older. They're equally as good in a different way. Black Thought actually improves every single year.
Yeah, I'd actually go that far. I'd agree that Black Thought gets better with age. I'd also say that Q-Tip and Pusha T have also gotten better. Q-Tip thinking to the Tribe Called Quest comeback album, like his rapping on that one is so breathless. Like you compare it to like his choppier flows on like the first 2 Tribe Called Quest albums, and like it's like I can't believe how much he's grown. And then Pusha T, he's really worked his menace. Like his flow is so calculated now, but like he's playing it up so much, and like I fucking love it. So. Yeah, those for me, like the 3 rappers have gone best with age.
Yeah, I think Push is definitely a good suggestion for that. I think that but he was always like in Thought. Well, the thing is, Push was always great. I think Thought was always like Thought on the first 2 Roots albums is a really good rapper for his role. Like, I mean, on Do You Want More, he's just kind of like part of a crew, I guess. On Illadelph Half-Life, he leads the crew. On this, he's like a standout rapper, and then like each Roots album, he takes more and more of the responsibility till like you get onto like Undone, where it's like he's had to carry a whole narrative by himself, which he does on the last 2 Roots albums. And Rising Down is kind of like the equivalent of Rolodex album, except the Roots are like where Questlove is the producer and Thought is like the house MC who has to go against this rap styles of. Because each track has is like a posse cut with a different group of people, more or less. There are like a few, or it's like the signature Roots group of like Greg Porn, who has the worst rap name ever, and Dice Raw, and Truck North. But then like you have, if you've heard the album, it makes sense. I feel like we're saying that a lot this episode. But anyway, I don't really have much else to say about this album. I've said that like 3 times. So I had a lot more than I thought to say about this album. I like every Roots album. They haven't made a bad album. Thought solo stuff is great too, but it's no substitute for a new Roots album. It's been entirely too long. I agree, and I could give less than a shit about Jimmy Fallon. I'm glad that it's made sure they're set for life, but I really don't like that guy. He is not funny, and there was the joke I heard about how Jimmy Fallon would have O.J. Simpson on right after he got out of jail and have him chase him around with a rubber knife, pretending to stab him. The Roots played yakety sax.
I don't know where the joke is from, but that sounds like a skit that I'm going to see on a Jimmy Fallon episode.
So I'll pass it off to you, Caleb, if you want to go up with your choice. Yeah, Marshall.
I think Marshall, it was you, right? Because
yeah, like if you want to pick, you can go ahead. But like I don't mind either, right?
I mean, I guess one of my albums is there were a lot of interesting Southern hip hop that came out in '99. There was a good Missy Elliott album, as is tradition with Missy Elliott. In around that time, there was a million No Limit albums, as is tradition. All of which have amazing covers. So I encourage everyone to seek out those album covers. There was a very early Lil Wayne album, but really the Cash Money record that I wanted to talk about, I guess one of them and two of them, really, two of the best ones, the BG, Chopper City in the Ghetto, and the Hot Boys Guerrilla Warfare records, which I know Patrick hasn't heard. I don't think you've heard the Hot Boys record, or you haven't heard in a while. But
any of that. I haven't heard any Wayne prior to like 2000, 2001.
Okay. So yeah, I think when you talk about the Cash Money like classic records from that era, it was like 400 Degrees, Chopper City in the Ghetto, and Guerrilla Warfare, like records that are cited a lot. And really, it's just because Manny Fresh just goes the fuck off on these beats. I guess in terms of Chopper City in the Ghetto, it's the best BG record. It's some of Manny Fresh's best beats. It's got Birdman features, and you don't even care because this is when Birdman was charismatic. There's not a track that I don't like on it. It's probably my second favorite Cash Money record behind 400 Degrees. And BG's voice, I think, is so cool, and his like, I feel like he complements Manny Fresh's beats. He and Juvenile more than anyone complement Manny Fresh's beats, and I think that this is a huge album that I'm glad got appreciation. Like it's risen over time in appreciation, I think, in nerd circles and in the like general as Southern hip hop has gotten that like 2010s revival, not in terms of modern stuff, but in terms of the older stuff. But yeah, like, you know, Bling Bling, Playing With It Raw, you know, With the BG, Thuggin', Hard Times, like those are all songs I played a lot, and definitely a classic Southern hip hop record. And yeah,
I hadn't heard of it. No, I hadn't heard it. So I'll definitely have to check it out.
Yeah, I think one thing that strikes everybody about this album, whether you're hit or miss on BG as a rapper, is just the beats are insane. And it's about like an hour, but it doesn't feel like that because it's so, I think a lot of what makes this is, and Juvenile's best music as well, is it's really absurd in a way that's fun. And they're kind of just like taking you along with the ride. Like, I really think this was an album that you could see Cash Money taking over the lane that No Limit had and running with it. This was because 400 Degrees was the year before, and I think from that record onwards, Cash Money had it because they had that album. Juvenile was at his height. They had this album with BG. The Hot Boys album, Guerrilla Warfare, came out the same year, which is a great record. Lil Wayne, you can hear a lot of his he was doing like the sing-songy stuff in '99, and then even after BG and Juvenile and those guys died down, Lil Wayne started with the Carters, and so Cash Money really just ran hip hop on the charts, and then after Lil Wayne's relevance wasn't peak anymore, then it was Drake. So I think these mid to late 90s Cash Money records, and you could start to see their ascent. And really, Manny Fresh does not get enough credit. I'm going to use this time to get on my soapbox about Manny Fresh, because he's one of the all-time great producers. People thought when they were doing those IG rap battles earlier during quarantine that Scott Storch had better beats than Manny Fresh. Get the fuck out of here. Manny Fresh, one of the best producers in rap, and super influential, and deserves to be up there because he's produced so many great beats, so many classics, and he was the backbone for this Cash Money run into their takeover of hip hop, and then Birdman screwed him over. So fuck Birdman.
I was going to say, when you were making that list of, how Cash Money run hip hop for so long, I was going to say, and amazingly, all those people ran the charts for so long and didn't see a dime off of it, but Birdman definitely ate very well for a very long time. And secondly, about, what was my second point? God damn it, I'm really bad at I completely lost my train of thought about what my second point was. About, it was probably just making fun of Birdman again, so...
Yeah, Birdman at one point was charismatic, and like you could at least.
No. Birdman was always charismatic, and that's actually what has saved his like. I never want to listen to a whole album of him, but like sometimes he can like he's tolerable in the sense sometimes of just showing up in that Diddy, old Jim Jones sort of way of just showing up on a track and talking shit. Like
well, he did that on the. Well, the best Birdman song is "What Happened to That Boy" with the Clips on it, which is an amazing Manny Fresh beat. Once again, or no, it's a Neptune's beat. My bad. I think it's a Neptune's beat. Amazing beat. Birdman just talks shit as is tradition, and
there's a really great version of that on the either MIA Diplo Piracy Funds Terrorism Volume 1 or the MIA Santa Gold Top Ranking. I forget which one. I think it's the MIA one. Or not MIA Santa Gold, Diplo Santa Gold. From back when Diplo was really, really good. But
right.
There's a really that. Yeah, that's the Immortal Birdman song. And there's like one other, probably something off the tour Volume 1 where they weren't really Birdman songs.
Yeah,
as much as song.
It's the first song. It's
Lifestyle.
Well, Lifestyle too, but there's another one. I think Da Vinci, right? The first track. Yeah, that's a great song. He's Birdman just talks a bunch of shit about Rich Gang and
is this Rich? Oh yeah, yeah.
Birdman's
okay,
like Rich Gang, like we're gonna run the game for however many years, whatever. And then of course Rich Gang broke up. But
think about Rich Homie Quan stopped going in.
He stopped going in. He all of his mixtapes about him promising he would never stop going in were truly false. Rich Homie, you lied to us. But anyway, yeah, great. I think both albums from this year are great. I probably prefer Chopper City and the Ghetto by a little bit, but listening to Hot Boys records, one, because they're good. I think people should listen to them. I mean, maybe they're a little long, but Lil Wayne is not like a master rapper on like the album, but every beat is good. Juvenile is really good on it. Like they're just basically like Cash Money, like essentially almost compilation records. And they're just really good, like gangster rap, like like dirt southern rap records from around that time. And you could hear Lil Wayne, you could hear him start to ascend, like where he was going to be. Now we have the hindsight of like, oh yeah, Lil Wayne was the shit for a long time, but this is like just before he took over, hip hop. So it's interesting to hear, like we're talking about like Eminem and the Roots and whatever, and those albums were big for certain scenes in hip hop. Like I think Things Fall Apart was big on, even though it wasn't a conscious record, I think it was big on. It was a big record for like a lot of like underground hip hop that leaned in the conscious direction. Whereas if you listen to like these albums, you could hear the South's grip on mainstream hip hop start to take form. So yeah, that's all I've got.
really blind, like No Limit and Early Cash Money are blind spots for me. The only No Limit album I can safely say that I know very well is Soulja Slim, Give It to Him Raw.
It's a great.
Which I used back when I didn't know shit about hip hop. It was one of those albums that, like, if you looked at like cracked meme lists or whatever, it'd be like, oh, look at the funny album cover because of the title, and it's like got the Pen and Pixel album cover with like Soulja Slim's in like army fatigues, and there's like a superimposed tank, and it's Pen and Pixel. If you know what that name means, you can guess what the album cover is. It's a great album. He raps his ass off.
I love Soulja Slim. I think that's my favorite No Limit record. Because the other, I'm not going to talk about it at long form, but the other best No Limit record is Max World War III, which came out in '99 actually as well. Now looking at it, and that's a great record too. No Limit somehow at their best were putting out like 20-song albums, and they were fire. Regardless, I guess I'll preface that by saying you have to be really into what they're doing. But if you're into it, and if it's like your thing, you're gonna like it for 20 songs. So, yeah. So that's Soulja Slim is great.
I'm glad you mentioned the No Limit, though, because we're talking 1999. You can't talk 1999 and not talk No Limit because they were everywhere. Like, I remember, again, from being like an outside, like a 13-year-old kid who didn't really listen to hip hop but watched a lot of MTV, and like No Limit was breaking through. It was like, and it was very much regional stuff that was outside the mainstream that still managed to get mainstream play. Like, it was very low, but like I remember I got the hookup playing in movie theaters, like, and that was like a hood film that was like definitely had production values of like a straight to VHS movie, but it was playing in movie and like like something that had like Silk the Shotgun starring acting role. And
yeah, Master P, his business model was like, hey, how much can I squeeze from this revenue stream right now? And then can I get other revenue streams and squeeze them dry as well? And he was like, how much can I overwork my artists?
But at least but you always, I don't know, you'd have to, somebody can check my work on this. I don't think you hear stories too much about him not paying his artists. Like, he doesn't have a Birdman reputation.
No, he doesn't have a Birdman reputation. He was always I think he was always a respected label owner. And I think because he started his own label. That was he CEO and founder. So I think he had I'm pretty sure he had a good rep. I'm sure I can look at Ghost to fact check me on this one, but I think he had a pretty good rep when it comes to paying his artists. Not Birdman. I will say Master P put out an album in '99 that I have not heard because I've heard it's garbage. But
I'm sure it's like songs. Was the Snoop Dogg No Limit album '99? Did he put out a No Limit album?
He had an album.
Was that '99? Was that '98?
The one with Dr. Dre again. No Limit Top Dog.
Oh, that was '99.
Yeah.
That's one of the better Snoop Dogg records that isn't Doggy Style.
That's not saying much, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, you're right about that. I like that album, though.
I think it's incredible that Snoop Dogg and Nas, to a much lesser extent, really built their lifelong reputations off the backs of one album, basically.
Yeah, like just the reputation of like, hey, this guy is in the GOAT discussion.
Exactly. This guy has solidified the fact that he will always be a great rapper and amongst the discussions of best rappers of all time. And, they don't really have to do anything else. They just show up.
Right. Although I will say Snoop, I think, is one of the best presences on a mic in hip hop ever.
Yeah, he definitely has a way of like an aura. Like you just kind of vibe hard when he shows up, and he's got that distinct voice to it, very smooth flow. It's not saying much usually, but that's fine.
Yeah, and he's always been like a shit talker. Sorry, Patrick, I'm cutting you off there.
It's cool. Snoop, I would say, doesn't just have one album rep; it's a 2-album rep because he kind of had that Ghostface on the Raekwon album roll on the Chronic.
Yeah, so, absolutely. So like 1.5, 1.5.
Yeah,
and also. Snoop also occupied a role in pop culture from very early in his rap career that Nas didn't. Like, Nas is always... When Nas tried to cross over, you got, like, Belly, which was Nas not a born actor. If you couldn't tell from his skits, Nas is not exactly the most natural actor. And I cannot wait to get to the Nas albums, as again, I tip my hand to what I'm going to talk about. But yeah, whereas Snoop, I think, like, I remember as a kid, like, you knew about his, like, murder charges, him, like, skipping bail to show up and perform at the MTV VMAs. Do Murder Was the Case, which was a pretty amazing performance. And he somehow managed to not get killed, like, managed to leave death row and not get killed. Like, at the time, it seemed like he was probably going to be the third person to get shot, like, after Biggie and Pac. Like, somebody got shot in 96, somebody got shot in 97. Like, it probably figured, because Suge probably had both of them killed. Like, let's be real. Like, that.
Yeah.
So, it stands to reason he probably would have had Snoop killed for skipping out on the label, but somehow he didn't. Like, and Snoop manages to be like a beloved figure who shows up on children's shows and in movies, even though he probably almost definitely killed a guy at least once.
He's like we've said this, he's like the cool rap uncle. Like, it's that sort of like, that's his persona, even though you know that at one point in time he's like,
and no one has gotten away with more trash features and cross-genre crossovers and brand extensions than Snoop.
No one. And has somehow managed to still be endearing while doing it all.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. People still buy into it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and you're like, how is that?
He's never lost his cred. Not in a way that I know of, anyway.
he claimed to morph into a lion, be Bob Marley reincarnated, and did a reggae album with Diplo producing and Eddie Murphy featuring. And this did not, like, people just kind of chuckled and moved on.
Yeah, they laughed. They might have heard it, Snoop Lion, and they just didn't think about it anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, he's Snoop is definitely a character, but yeah, I mean, and for the record, I would just like to alert our producer if he can please put the No Limit Top Dog album cover on the screen, because it is wonderful, and like every No Limit cover is just there's a lot going on. I love the font. I love the fact that it looks like he's mean mugging his own movie poster on it. The dogs look incredibly fake. I don't know which intern superimposed the dogs into the car, but it's a great cover, and it's a good album too, actually. And it was not. I won't talk about it, but for a No Limit album in '99, it was a good album. No Limit had this thing where, and I guess it's the same thing as the Mac album, World War III. They had this thing where they would do like meshing Southern hip hop with like G-Funk stuff. And with Snoop, that makes perfect sense, but they kind of did it with Mac too. And I feel like in the South that goes back to, I want to say, like Outkast records, like Organized Noise stuff on the early Outkast, the first Outkast album. As I would say that would go back to, maybe even further, but the Southern rap and G-Funk similarities and like crossover potential, No Limit had a hand in a little bit of that, at least on some of their albums.
Well, yeah, that would be Beats by the Pound, I think, handled the vast majority of the No Limit stuff. Obviously, Snoop had some Dre stuff after I think there was no Dre on the first Snoop No Limit album, and people were really mad about that. I think there was like some sort of I think that was when Dre was trying to do his no gangster rap phase, which led to the '96 album that he's tried to like erase out of history. But that might have been then, or it might have been because of the Snoop skipping to a Southern or the label or whatever. But either way, I'm pretty sure there was no Dre on the first No Limit album. There is on the next one. Also, are you telling me that he's not the dogs aren't in the car with him?
I thought, I mean, maybe it's my bad. I feel like the dogs are. I feel like those aren't real. Maybe they are. You think? I don't know. I feel like the dogs are just. Well, then again, it's '99. It's not like you have like superimposed. Yeah, I'm thinking ahead of time here. No, the dogs probably were in the car.
I'm fucking with you. They're definitely not in the car.
I was gonna say, I feel like they're not in the car, but their eyes give it away.
Yeah, there's something very fake about it for sure.
There's something very. I love this cover. I love a lot of No Limit covers. But yeah, I guess when it comes to like Southern, there were a lot of good Southern rap albums this year, and so the ones that I talked about just now were ones worth checking out because even though they're pretty big records, they don't have many ratings on RYM. So yeah.
Well, Raphael Sadiq has a fucking feature on this. Would have not expected that. That's an interesting choice. I mean, I guess there was like a token neo soul feature even on like a No Limit album at this point.
Well, Big Crit heard that and put him on every one of his albums. after that.
Yeah, Big Crit could have learned some editing skills from No Limit and some quality control skills for his for most of his studio albums.
Yeah.
Eventually,
I think Big Crit just burnt himself out from doing too much in his early first 3 years of breaking through, and then just running out of gas in from 2013 to 2017.
Yeah, you could really hear it in the Catalactica Live from the Underground. So you could really hear it, kind of just. It wasn't what it was on the.
It wasn't as hungry.
Yeah.
And also it was more of the same. So that hunger or that lack thereof, it was more obvious.
Yeah, he needed that time off to make Forever Is a Mighty Long Time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I don't have anything more to say about those Cash Money or No Limit records. So Marshall, do you want to go?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna talk really briefly. I'm just gonna skirt over them because I don't really want to talk about them. But regarding the more popular hip hop albums in 1999, we're talking mainstream Billboard albums, the Notorious B.I.G. posthumous album that I frankly don't even want to talk about, or the DMX album, or the Puff Daddy album. I think, and I truly mean this, I think the Jay-Z Volume 3 album is way more interesting than any of them. I don't think it's a great album by any means. I appreciate what he's trying to do. He's brokering deals with Dr. Dre. He's got a Bun B feature. He's going outright pop with Mariah Carey, and he's got that 50 Cent dig because 50 Cent released his debut single at that same year, right? And he's taking shots at Jay-Z. I think it's a fascinating album in terms of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. I don't think the whole volume, volume 1 to 3, I don't think much of any of them, but at least this one, it stood for more, I think.
It was.
I think it was it. Oh yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, I don't like this album. It's very long. He raps well on some of it, but the problem is when he's rapping well, it kind of highlights when he's not trying. And a lot of the tracks, you can tell when Jay doesn't feel like trying. And a lot of the pop songs really don't inspire him to put in much of an effort. That would be a lot of the ammunition for Nas and Nas fans and Nas stans in their beef, was that Jay could be lazy as hell. There's actually a track in the Nas Jay beef that Nas had that's got pretty forgotten. It circulated as both Analyze This and No Love Lost, where it has this really lazy Jay verse, half a verse, and then Nas cuts in with a verse dissing Jay and talks about how lazy he is. And I feel like you get about a third of these songs have Jay using this really lazy, lackadaisical flow. I feel like you get that on the Mariah song for sure.
Oh, absolutely. He's not even there. He's not even fucking awake on the Mariah song.
It's there's a very borderline comatose quality to some of them, and it's I hate Big Pimpin'. I always have. I always will. I hate.
Oh, really? I dig it, man.
That song. A negative opinion of UGK for entirely too long of a time. It gave me. I mean, I love UGK now, but for the longest time, I couldn't. And of Jay-Z for that matter. I thought Jay-Z was just dumb pop rap for the longest time because of that song. I could not stand it. And because it was ubiquitous. It was just, I don't know. But there are moments on here. I think So Ghetto was great. Jay over Premier is, of course, outstanding. And although Lupe Fiasco has the best verse over that beat on the Enemy of the State tape. I I think this is interesting more as Jay setting himself up as a career move by making extensions to the South, by making extensions to Dre.
Yeah.
And that he's a great businessman and he's talented enough to make these like regional crossovers and not feel like a biter, although he kind of is. But it doesn't feel like a Drake situation where he's literally sucking the stylistic essence out of artists just to remain relevant. Which, even though Drake is a fan, like you can tell Drake is a genuine fan of at least 50% of the artists that he's swag Draculaing, it doesn't come across that way when he all of a sudden starts aping all their mannerisms like 3 weeks after they break out or he does a song with them. It, like, Jay had a quality of working with you because he respected you and you kind of got a mutual sort of, it was beneficial for both artists.
Yeah.
It felt. And that album was interesting in that way for me. Musically, not so much. Between Reasonable Doubt and The Blueprint, I don't have much use for Jay-Z.
Yeah. Like I agree. I agree with all of that. Like I think, although that being said, like There's Been a Murder is a really good song. You talked about So Ghetto. I think that one's also a good one. It's got like a heavier DJ Premier beat than what he was doing on Moment of Truth, but you could tell it was a DJ Premier beat. But I guess what I was trying to say is like I'd rather listen to this than the DMX album, or like I'd rather listen to this than like I guess like that's not saying much, but like in terms of like really popular hip hop albums from the East Coast that year, like I think that this one holds up well-ish. It is for sure. It is way too fucking long at 70 minutes, but. You know, and you're absolutely right. Jay-Z's sort of phoning it in sometimes, and his flow is not as good as it would suddenly be 2 years from now. But yeah,
or as good as it was in 1996 on Reasonable Doubt. Like
absolutely not, right? But yeah,
There's Been a Murder is the only real indication of him still having that storytelling ability and the ability to like flex his flow like that. Like. He doesn't really call upon those skills very much at all on this album. He's too busy just checking off all the boxes in terms of R&B features, and like some of these Volume 1, Volume 2 feel like label samplers. This one feels more like a radio. I'm trying to think of the right term for it. Like something like a radio promotional sampler that he's doing, where it's like you have 3 songs for the South and 3 songs for an urban market and 3 songs for the Northeast, and I'm sure it made him a lot of money.
Yeah, I'm sure it did.
Yeah. And I guess making this album would allow him to make The Blueprint. Like to have that sort of like comfort, like that sort of artistic cushion to make the album art that gives you the space to make an album that really you make a statement with.
Mm-hmm.
Even though The Blueprint still did have like one, it had Girls, Girls, Girls on it. But other than that, it doesn't seem, The Blueprint, it kind of existed like it didn't care whether or not it was going to be commercially successful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for the most part, absolutely.
The commercially successful songs off The Blueprint ended up being hits organically.
Yeah.
We're not like, you don't know it was just a hit organically because that song's hard as fuck. That's why. Like it was, like it wasn't designed in a lab, so to speak, to be a hit. Or like you said, it wasn't sampling different regions and hoping something stuck.
Like if you think about what was successful off, like commercially successful or notable off The Blueprint, like you think about the lead single was Jay-Z basically trying to, bragging that he was not guilty. Like that was mainly the message he wanted to get out there. Whether or not the song sold, I think was not important to him. Takeover was him putting people on notice.
Mm-hmm.
These were not calculated moves to sell records. These were him making statements.
Yeah.
So, all this is way more interesting than Volume 3 to me. And I don't have too much time for this album.
All right.
And the DMX album, by the way, just to touch on it, is the first DMX album. Like I was about to say something about how, well, I'd rather listen to a DMX album than this album because DMX is a more complicated persona, and the fact that this guy was the top of the rap game when he was so dark and uncompromising, even though he did have like crossover songs. But then I look at the track list and I'm like, this DMX album sucks.
Okay, it's got 2 bangers. It's got 2 fucking bangers.
It's got a few. It's an hour, and I've listened to about 20 minutes of it tops.
Yeah.
And I never want to hear "Party Up" again in my life, even though like it's a dumb fun song, but I heard it a million billion times.
It was in my head like 10 different times today, like just thinking about doing this episode because you can't really talk 1999 without talking about DMX, like even briefly, right? But yeah, right. Absolutely. Yeah, it's dumb fun.
but I like the first two and the fourth one better than this. And I know the fourth one doesn't get a whole lot of love, but I think it's actually a really compelling concept album, even though it's way too long and their crossover songs kind of spoiled the concept. This one, I heard it. I didn't own it. Did I own this one? I forget. I own like 3 DMX albums on CD, and this may or may not have been one of them. The Cisco song is really aggressive. I mean, I feel like all Cisco songs are pathetic and in their own way aggressive, like for songs for the ladies, I guess. But DMX should not make songs for the ladies, just in general. And yeah, what these bitches want. I don't think what these bitches want is DMX, unless the bitches are female dogs, because dogs like DMX and DMX likes dogs. So maybe they want DMX.
I kind of like that hook on that song. I'm gonna put myself on a fire. It's also what's the song? Drake interpolated that for a song on Views. You With Me? Unrelated, but just.
I didn't even notice that. Yeah, I guess so.
It's like the intro to You With Me is
I haven't heard Views in 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
It came out 2016, right? So 4 years.
2016, yeah.
I will say What's My Name has a line, make cowards disappear into thin air by putting shit through them. I think that's a funny line. Like, I think that's a genuinely funny line.
What's My Name is classic. What's My Name is by far the best thing on here. It's like, it stands out over everything else. I seem to remember, I think Here We Go Again is pretty good too. But I remember like thinking that the 2 lady songs are embarrassing and I never want to hear Party Up Again. I don't remember anything about anything else on here.